Good morning, everybody. I wanted to take a little time to answer the rest of your questions, your great small ruminant parasite questions that you sent me. And I've got about 4 here. So the first one is, please tell me how you feel about Valcor, which is Zoetis's new combination deworming product that is a doramectin levamisole combo. So it combines an avermectin class with the levamisole class. That's not really the class name, but levamisole is the main one we know. So the thinking behind this product is with regards to combination deworming, where sometimes we recommend using 2 or maybe even 3 class dewormings at the same time to take care of worms that are moderately resistant or significantly resistant to the individual dewormers. So the idea is that, and this is just a numbers example, that I'm making up, don't quote me on the numbers exactly, but let's say you have 2 dewormers that are only 70% effective each. Well, when you use those together, then you can achieve like a 90% kill. It kind of has this additive effect. And so combination deworming is something that we're moving to in order to deal with these resistant parasites. One of the things that it's used for is you purchase an animal, bring an animal in from another place, and you may choose to triple class deworm them for that. So this Valcor product is a combination dewormer. And so what do I think about it? The thinking behind it is correct. This idea that we should be combination deworming and getting higher kill on these parasites because dead parasites don't reproduce. The issue is going to be with it, and when it came out, I knew it's gonna happen. I just promise you, is that we have to use it in a refugia sparing way, which means you can't give it to everybody. And so that is going to be either its success or its downfall. Its success will be if people will use it in a refugia sparing way in combination with other parasite control measures. If everybody is going to run every animal through the chute and deworm everybody, then you're going to develop resistance to 2 classes at the same time versus just 1 if you just ran everybody through and did 1. So the thinking behind it is correct. This is a sound parasite control measure to combination deworm, but it has to be used wisely in a refugia sparing way. Of course, refugia being those worms that are not exposed to a dewormer and therefore should have sort of maximum susceptibility. And I talk about refugia a lot in this small ruminant parasite series, and I do talk about combination deworming and sort of more information about that. And in fact, I have a herd example in that series where I demonstrate combination deworming and where combination deworming goes wrong. And I think that's really important to see how that can happen. The second one is, and I think I addressed this in the last video, but I'm going to address it again because it came up, is levamisole safe for pregnant goats? And this veterinarian describes a situation. There was a goat herd that had resistance to cydectin. They used levamisole. The does had been confirmed pregnant at 60 days, and then they never kidded. And so the owner was sort of going back to the levamisole. Levamisole is considered safe for pregnant goats at appropriate doses. I think that's really important. Remember, levamisole has a relatively narrow margin of safety. We've got to be careful about how we dose it. We've got to be careful if we're estimating weights. That's another thing. I show you guys a study in this series where we looked at people's ability to estimate weights on goats, and we're terrible at it. Spoiler alert on that research project. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind, is were they dosed correctly. The other thing to keep in mind is that goats are CL dependent throughout pregnancy. And the CL can be lysed with release of prostaglandins. And so anything potentially could cause a goat to abort that might cause them to release prostaglandins. And so I always think that that's important to keep in mind in goats, that stressful things, inflammatory things. We think about all the infectious abortive agents, and for sheep and goats, there's a lot of those. But even stressful handling, getting banged around, having inflammation, those kinds of things can also cause goats to abort. And so we need to think about those well. So that was a long way to a ham sandwich on that levamisole, but I do consider it safe in goats. Many of my colleagues do consider it safe in goats. Pregnant goats, there's not data out there that I'm aware of that it's a problem. Another veterinarian describes that most of his clients are hobby and show animals. I'm in that same situation. I know many of you guys are in that situation. So basically, with regards to parasite control, do we accept that these animals basically live on dirt and then just need to have a consistent deworming schedule, thus potentially adding to the resistance issue? So he's describing these situations where these owners do not have land for rotation. And so these animals are just living on dirt. They eat this grass down to nothing. And then these owners put them on these, every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks, whatever, these consistent deworming schedules. Or is there another way that we can help show and hobby animal owners manage their parasite load? The pickle here always is land mass and then emotional attachment. So the emotional attachment issue comes in that what we should be doing is FOMACHA scoring these animals, and repeat offenders need to be culled. Well, we know what that situation looks like. It's always the little girl's favorite goat that's the one that needs to go. I do have a scenario like this that I show in my talks about where we were in a herd. We were very clearly able to identify this one animal that was the downfall of everybody else. It's actually some really cool fecal egg per gram counts that we found. Actually, it was a sheep flock. So I think in these herds, what we end up doing, and we really should be doing this with everybody, but I think in small herds, this becomes just critical, is you've got to take the multimodal approach. You've got to look at nutrition, trace minerals, protein, genetics, which gets touchy. How do we manage that ground from an environmental standpoint? How do we anticipate weather patterns and seasons and respond to those? How do we use those drugs most appropriately? We may be in a situation where we're combination deworming. There are a lot of ways to attack a worm problem that don't involve deworming every 6 weeks. And that, I think, is really prevalent, particularly in show animals, because a lot of 4-H and FFA leaders, this is not to be disrespectful of them, but a lot of them will recommend like a market lamb, just deworming every 6 weeks, kind of up until the show. And that's fine in a market lamb who's going to, he has a defined endpoint. But if they translate that into their doe or ewe flock or herd, you're going to be in trouble really quickly, because those animals we want to live for a long time, and a lot of times they're on permanent pasture like what's being described here. So this is where I think alternative things like biowerma, brain dead, Lespedeza, some of these other things that we talk about for parasite control, these little flocks are where a lot of these things become, I think, really important. And you may look at some of those controls and go, that's really expensive. But in these show and hobby flocks where you've only got a few animals, they actually pencil out to not be so bad. So that was kind of a messy round and round thing, but these are the situations where you want to look at a lot of different things at once. And that herd approach to parasite problems, that module that I have, that is what that whole thing is. That whole module is how I talk about how I go into a herd that has problems, and then how I investigate each of those pieces of kind of the perfect storm that comes together, and how I kind of address each of those things. So I think you might find that really helpful there, but you got to go at it about 5 or 6 different ways to really get to the bottom of that. So the very last one I'll just mention, it's kind of more of a comment than a question, but I think it's important for all of us to have some perspective. And I feel so lucky. I have a lot of international people who follow LACE, and that really means a lot to me, that so many people have confidence in what I share. But this veterinarian, the biggest problem in my country is the lack of knowledge of livestock farmers about its tests, and the lack of well-equipped laboratories that are easy and close to access, as well as the limited number of anti-parasitic drugs, and most importantly, the lack of knowledge of our veterinarians about clinical parasitology. I would like to say to this individual that this is not just a problem in your country, specifically for the things that you are describing about lack of knowledge of livestock farmers about the tests, and the limited number of anti-parasitic drugs. Those are issues that are worldwide issues. You probably maybe even have access to less classes than we do here in the U.S., but we only have 3 classes even here in the U.S. I know most places have ivermectin in some formulation, and that may be all you have, and that is certainly a huge limitation. And I would just encourage you to keep fighting and to keep working with any aid organizations that you're aware of. They may be able to get microscopes into areas where they haven't been before. And yes, this issue of lack of clinical parasitology knowledge, it's a challenge. It's a challenge everywhere. And I know that it's an exquisite issue in many, many countries. And so what I would say is, please reach out to me. I actually provide a lot of my CE for free to missionaries that go into foreign countries and to veterinarians working in those countries, because I understand that the price point is sometimes too high for veterinarians in other countries to be able to afford. And so I would encourage you to reach out to me specifically about that. We may be able to actually, I know we can work out an agreement to be able, at least I can help you on this lack of knowledge of clinical parasitology, and I'm happy to do what I can to help with that situation. So I will respond to your email specifically. Let's talk about that. Thank you, everybody. I hope that this was helpful and answered some of your questions. Please continue to send those in. I've got a couple of more emails to send you guys over the next few days we're going to kind of tackle coccidia next, and that's always a big one for everybody. So have a wonderful day. Take care.